Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to start the session off very quickly by doing a sound check. If you can hear me, please type yes into your chat box. I can then see we're live. Everybody can hear us. There might be a slight delay, but can everybody hear us? Are we live? Looks like we are. Just waiting for a couple of responses. Perfect, thank you. Thanks, Gavin. Great, fantastic. So just a quick introduction from me. My name is Chantel Newton and I'm the Marketing Manager at the UK Contact Centre Forum. And I'm also the editor of our online e-magazine Contact Centre Monthly. Just a couple of housekeeping points to go through before we begin. If you do have any questions for any of our panel this afternoon, please post them into the question box and I will pop in and ask the questions to the panel when we are able to. There will be a question and answer session at the end as well. So if you want to leave your question until then, please feel free to do so. The webinar is expected to last around an hour. If you're unable to stay for the whole session, we are recording and the link will be emailed to all participants within 24 hours of the webinar ending. So we're going to get today's session started and I'm going to hand you over to our chair for the session today, Andrew Hall. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Quantanite. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Chantal. And it's lovely to be here and it's lovely to be here in such great company as well. We've got a tremendous panel of experts that I think are going to bring some good thinking and some good ideas over the next hour. So really looking forward and thank you for everyone for attending. I want to just introduce the session just in terms of where we're trying to get to today. So, I mean, I've been to a number of events like many of us, and a lot of those events I find people are becoming more and more depressed often about the state of everything. And I was in one where I think everyone arrived at the event in fairly good spirit and then they left feeling like the world was on their shoulders. And I suspect quite a lot of people who come to these kind of calls are kind of sitting on an interesting challenge within their business at the moment. And we've done quite a lot of discussion internally within Quantanite around resilience, and in particular around a book called Fortitude, which kind of talks about what resilience is and how companies need to have resilience in their buildings, in their people, in everything to do with their business today, and especially having come through COVID and the reaction we had to make through COVID, and then now into the economy. And both here and in the US, we see a similar state where companies are trying to work out how to maintain their workforce, how to optimize their workforce against the revenues that are coming in, and really trying to work through how to steer the ship through over the next couple of years. And the group we've got on today are all people that I think are on this journey as well. So I'm hoping that the conversation will flow today and we'll have a good set of commentary through this as well. So any questions you've got, please do ask, and we'll steer those through into the session as well. But I just want to start by quickly introducing, or having you guys just introduce yourselves for a couple of minutes, maybe starting with Hugh.
Hi everyone. So I'm Hugh. I'm the head of customer support within Asda. Just a bit about me, been in contact centers now for just over 20 years in a mixture of working for BPOs in addition to in the retail sector where I obviously am now, mainly in operational guises. So I'd say that's where my area of expertise is. And then just a bit about me. Happily married, or at least from my side, you'd have to ask my wife, with 2 children. And apart from them keeping me busy, I have a very unhealthy passion for trainers, which I collect.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Chris.
I'm Chris McLaughlin. I'm Head of Customer Experience for Iceland Foods. I've been working for Iceland for about 2.5 years now. I've worked in contact centres in some shape or form for probably the last 15, 16 years, but my background prior to retail was energy and communications through either the Energy Ombudsman or doing some BPO work for the Tata Group on behalf of Scottish Power. My unhealthy obsession is all things rugby league, the best brand of rugby, which many will dispute, I'm sure. And I spend, much to my fiance's disappointment, too many minutes watching that, no matter who's playing.
Brilliant. Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. My name is Mark Jackson, Customer Service Manager for Lidl GB. Pretty new into the role, coming up just for 6 weeks now. Prior to that, some Chris and Hugh, been in contact centres roughly about 13 years. Started off my journey in teleperformance, moved after that to Ascensos, looking after retail clients in the kind of operational space for about 8.5 years there. I'm not sure if I have any unhealthy obsessions, to be honest. You know, probably football, I would say. I won't mention the team because it divides a crowd in Glasgow, as most people know. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
Brilliant. Thank you. And last but not least, Graham.
Hi, good morning. Or good afternoon, I should say now. I'm Graham Matheson, and the Planning Performance Lead at John Lewis & Waitrose Partnership, which means I'm accountable for the John Lewis & Waitrose outsourced customer contact centre estate, in addition to having budget control, financial responsibility and reporting accountability for the in-house contact centre estate. Been in and around contact centres for nearly 30 years. I have a healthy obsession with rugby union, and unfortunately I have rugby union players' knees, because I've played for 25 years and my knees are absolutely knackered. So my unhealthy obsession is a desire to get back playing. The reality is my knees are never going to let me.
Thanks very much. So look, we put together 4 questions just to more to enable the conversation. And then Graham, I'm going to come to you first with kicking this off. So why every brand needs resiliency at the heart of their business and customer support operations? There's an opening question for you.
So I think it's an interesting question, Andrew, and I think it's a really broad topic. I think that when we look back over the last few years, and when I think back to my early days in contact centres, resilience was something that probably wasn't even considered. You know, I was back in the good old days of wall lights and buzzers that went off when calls were queuing, and team managers would think nothing, hollering across the call floor to find out why somebody was either away for a pee or not doing what they were tasked to do at that point in time. I think that what has happened during the last few years is that as an industry, we have woken up and grown up and become much more mature in our thinking and recognize that actually that employee experience drives a customer experience. And at the heart of what we're doing, whether we're selling frozen foods, selling cars, selling sofas and TVs, if we don't get our employee experience right, we're never going to get a great customer experience. And the reality is, you know, customers use one of 3 mediums to contact us. They either speak to us on the phone, they talk to us through a keyboard, or they talk to us through an app on a phone. And we can talk about very sexy tech options that overlay that, but that's the grim reality of it. It's one of those 3 channels. We have to accept that as an industry delivering customer experience, we need to become more resilient and capable at handling volumes of customer demand at a time that the customer wants it. You know, the good old days of banks and only being around Monday, Friday, 9 till 5, with a half-day closing on a Wednesday, those days are gone. And now that's great from a customer perspective because it means that we're so much more accessible. But as an industry, we have to get better at keeping up with that demand from the customers. Yeah, as a high street retailer, we've spent the last 140 years building a customer expectation of great experience, no matter how or when you come to us. One of the key challenges that we face is making sure that we've got the right people in the right place at the right time to deliver that great experience. Whether they be partners in store or partners in a contact centre in-house or partners in an outsourced contact centre somewhere else across the world. So that resilience and capability is now fundamental to us delivering a great experience to our customer. Like the days of us being able to say to customers, I'm really sorry, we're not around right now, please hold, please wait, or please send us an email or whatever, that crap stopped. You know, customers just don't buy it anymore. And I think that's as a result of that emotional journey that customers went on through COVID, where everyone was super nice and super forgiving. You know, we were all being really nice to our neighbours. We were all standing in our front doors, clapping for the NHS. That quite quickly then fell into it. Actually, do you know what? I've got toilet roll. I've got flour. I'm all right, mate. I'm not going to start handing that stuff out across the street. That same behaviour is quite rightly now coming through to us in terms of customer expectation. if we're not resilient and capable at handling that, whether it be through tech enablement or just having the right people around, we're done. We've lost our place completely in the industry. So I think that, why is it important? It's because it's about the customer and it's about the employee. Is there a pure tech solution to fix it? I'm not convinced there is. You know, Chat GPT and all of that stuff will try and tell you that it's the solution. It ain't. It's the emperor's new clothes, in the same way that a bunch of that other stuff was a few years ago. But I think if businesses that aren't enabled in trying to get themselves to a place where they're capable of delivering great experience all the time, they're never going to do it well.
Are you finding more that you're needing to think about resilience when it comes to your own team as well, and the team that you have from an outsourcing point of view, and how are you managing that? Because I mean, clearly being resilient towards your customers is one thing, and helping them with their needs, but you know, you've got a huge team within John Lewis, and I'm sure others have as well. You know, how are you managing that?
Yeah, so we've got 82,000 partners in our business, 82,000 co-owners across our business, and approximately 1,100 people employed in our outsourced contact center estate, in addition to the people we've got in-house. Yeah, I think that well-being, wellness, and resilience is a topic that I've spent more time talking about in the last 36 months than probably the prior 27 years in contact centers. In enabling those people to recognize that for us, it's about providing sound employment, good quality work, good working conditions for those people, no matter where or when. We made the same mistake as everybody did when COVID started. We kicked everybody to the house. So there's a laptop, go and work at home. The number of people that we had in our business, and probably in all organizations, where people were sitting on a dining chair, either working at a dining table or a folded up ironing board, that's just not a good way of working for anybody. There's a reason solitary confinement is used as a punishment, and we force that upon a bunch of our people. Now, it's fine for me. I've got a nice summer house at the bottom of my garden I can walk down to and sit and work, and I'm really cool with that. But if you're younger than me and living in shared accommodation, that's a really crap experience for those people. And I think that what we've now become way better at is recognizing that resilience in terms of staffing and well-being and people support is now as important. And I probably spend more energy on that stuff than I do about wondering whether my average speed of answer is fluctuating 2 or 3 seconds in a trading period or in a year. Actually, the reality is, what's the right thing to do for those people? Because if I can get that experience right for those people in terms of their working conditions, the kits that they're given, the hours that they're working, the flexibility that they're given, you know, we've now got a huge chunk of our people doing 4-day working weeks and all that kind of stuff. Recognizing that's not the right solution for everybody. But when I look at in the conversations we now have in terms of resourcing, supplementing our staff, rewarding our people properly, all of that stuff feeds into that resilience debate or conversation. It's about equipping them with great working conditions and appropriate tools and systems to be able to support our customers. Because if they don't have those, again, we're just wasting our time.
Great. Does anyone else have something to say on this? And I guess the only other point I'd make is around the mental well-being. We talk about the mental well-being of a lot of people now, and you know, is the work environment providing the right access to support in those areas? Does anyone else have any thoughts on what Graham said?
I think a big one for me is where Graham rightly said, during the whole COVID period, everybody loved everybody, and you know, we're out on our doorsteps clapping, and everyone's being kind and everyone's being nice, and that patience and that goodwill has dried up some months ago now. I think one of the challenges that we faced in contact centres is during COVID, when lots of us ramped up staff or tried to because of the increased contacts we were getting. We were taking on lots of people who weren't from that kind of background through furloughs or whatever else. So teaching resilience when you've got those difficult customers and they're getting into conflict with people. I've noticed over the last kind of 6-9 months that people find it, they carry those difficult calls more, but because they're not from that background. Now, so teaching resilience is a skill in how to compartmentalize that and move on from that without it overly impacting you has become a big part of our support network, as well as all the brilliant wellbeing things that I'm sure we're all doing. But actually, how do we do that on the floor through our coaching, through our support, actually teach resilience as a skill, because I do think it is a skill that can be built and increased and improved.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I mean, so kind of building on that, then the next question is quite relevant, isn't it? Really, in terms of agility within your organisation, because part of being able to be resilient is to be agile, is to be responsive to things as they happen. And we've moved beyond the we have a seasonal peak to actually we have very unusual situations that are occurring now quite regularly. So Hugh, how are you managing agility across both your usual seasonal events that happen? Have they changed for you at all? But also when you see these unusual situations occurring, and for many people that we work with, for example, we see people have outsourced to centres that now are fairly going through, well, I mean, Ukraine as a good example, going through some real challenges. And we've talked to people who have got, they call them electricity chasers. They're literally that laptop in hand running around the country trying to find somewhere to plug in. That's an incredibly unusual event for people to have to live through. And so how are you managing agility in the business?
It's a really good question. I think one of the main things, first and foremost, Graham spoke a lot about people, and it falls in line with this, but it's building really strong cross-functional relationships across the business. Because I think, going back to my experience in the contact center industry, probably for years now, contact centers has been seen somewhat as an island and almost a separate entity from the rest of the business. Whereas if you're going to build agility within the contact center function, or actually in any of the wider businesses that we're in within our industry, you need to have those strong relationships to understand what's coming along the line, whether it be marketing promotions, whether it be transformational roadmaps, so you can actually attempt to try and plan for some of those unknowns. You can never get it 100% right all the time, but it's better to do some form of planning rather than none at all. So I think that's probably a key thing that I've seen in terms of driving that. It's paramount, especially during, as you said, seasonal, especially we've just come out of peak just now. So it's looking at what you've got in terms of BAU and thinking in terms of the unknown, in terms of your seasonal. Is that fit for purpose in certain seasonal times? So something that I look at is, do you need to ramp up your daily calls? Do you need to have, and that's not just internally with stakeholders, that's also with your BPOs as well. How do you open the lines of communication in terms of certain bits of information that you probably wouldn't historically have shared with your BPOs, if you have those, in terms of your contact center estate, in terms of helping them support you in terms of planning and delivering. And I think doing that really allowed me, from an actor perspective, to really deliver a strong peak with their bit, I say, with the unknowns. To some extent, I think in the retail industry, you've gone through so many unknowns that you almost expect them. It's just slight variances of the unknowns. One that we saw was a huge payment issue, but despite those challenges, we were still able to deliver green across the peak period because we had those plans in place, whether it being contingency overtime, buy-in from colleagues to work extra hours should we need to deploy it at short notice, but more importantly, making sure that the colleagues are well communicated on the potential risk. So it's not just the last minute, we're throwing an ask at them, they don't have a clue whilst we're doing it. So actually they feel empowered in terms of supporting us and being agile themselves.
How far do you think we've moved up that maturity curve of contact centers now being seen as part of the core of the business? And it's an interesting observation, because I talk about outsourcers as not being a part of the business as well. Obviously, coming from, you have the outsourcer here, you have the company here, and there's a conduit of data that flows between, but not very much more. And I talk a lot about creating kind of that Venn diagram of value creation that sits in the middle, where you need to have a lot more than just a passing of KPIs, and we achieved it today. And equally, that if you just focus on KPIs, you miss out on a lot of the EQ that's needed to actually make customers happy. So how both in terms of the outsourcer, but as a contact center within your organization, is that blending across the whole of that ecosystem? Is it happening for you guys today?
It is happening, but I'd probably say it's still a work in progress. If I start probably internally for in-house contact centers within the retail industry, I think there's been massive strides, and people on this panel and other people probably listening in have done a lot of work in terms of trying to push that forward. I still think there's a lot of work in terms of actually how we do that, and it's by telling those compelling stories and being that custodian of the customer, for the use of a better phrase, to understand the importance of contact centers, because I still think to some degree with the social economic environment that we're in, the businesses will be looking at how to save to invest. And I think a lot of the time contact centers is almost the first port of call in terms of how do we save cost in that space to then drive into other areas of the business. And although we can absolutely support with that, and that's where BPOs can really support us with that, and with the developments that they've had, transition work without seeing an impact in terms of the experience. But there also still needs to be a lot of work for us to do in terms of bringing businesses on the journey. So we're not just seen as a cost center, because there's so much more that we can provide, especially in times where we need to have agility. There's opportunities to do sales through service, but also just the key insight that you get from investing in the people to some degree as well, the technology as well. The level of insight that you get to give to the business is so rich that it can drive a lot of initiatives as well.
Cool. Mark, I see you're nodding away on that one. So would you like to give anything to that?
Yeah, I think probably from my perspective, and you touched on it quite a lot there, is that the BPO contact centres can add so much back into the business in terms of insight. But when we're talking about responding to to the unknowns, and especially in retail, right, there's so many unknowns. I think we're all great at managing what we don't know. It's part and parcel of working in retail. Probably the overlooked part of that for me is actually how, by leveraging relationships within other areas of the organisation, for example, supply chain, the better tap in that you have from a contact centre perspective into the other areas of business. When those unknowns do arise, whether it be shortage in the warehouse, or I've got a challenge with getting my trucks out today, whatever it may be, having those relationships fostered throughout and almost entwined within the contact centre, means whenever those unknowns do arise, that you can just react to it so much quicker. So from my perspective, I think that's often an overlooked, but certainly an important one that from the contact centre that that people should be spending a bit of time on.
And Chris, I remember I was doing some work with it was actually a financial services organisation, and I remember they came up with a whole load of stuff they identified around their distribution channels that weren't working, and a lot of those required back office people to go and do some changes. But they had different KPIs and measurements that they were set on, and getting that priority of access to those people to make those changes to then affect the distribution was very difficult to do. How do you manage that kind of approach within the business today?
I think one of the biggest challenges that you ever have, when particularly trying to drive that insight, we all will be on this call with a huge pool of that data, but we have to understand that if you mentioned there, like supply chains working on particularly fixed KPIs, everyone's going to have their own individual kind of demands, individual needs that should ultimately feed into the whole business strategy. If they don't, something's gone wrong. But I try and champion our contact centre here at Iceland to be that pool of knowledge for everybody. So everybody's got their different needs, their different demands, and their different objectives. But we are the pool of knowledge and data for absolutely everyone. If it's a supply chain issue, we can tell you exactly how many customers are complaining about missing products, or if it's from our buyers, we can tell you what's damaged or poor product quality. If it's from retail, we can tell you exactly by subject code, exactly what's impacting what stores, by region, by area. And I think really trying to advertise us and be vocal about us being the first port of call for, if you've got an issue, come to us, we can give you the information that you need to make informed and educated decisions to improve your area and in turn the whole business, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, Graham, it's all about, I mean, you use partnerships obviously within John Lewis, but it's all about having everyone pointing in the same direction. Do you feel that the business works in that way, or how would you say companies could still improve in that kind of approach of everyone working towards the customer?
Yes, I think we're in a slightly unusual position that, you know, historically contact centers, we were seen as a cost to the business. We were a failure demand driven cost to the business. Then lockdown happened and we shut all of our shops. And all of a sudden, the John Lewis contact center estate became the sole face to the customer. And when you start to look at the number of transactions and the number of interactions that we have with customers annually across our contact center base, there's a recognition there that actually maybe we are missing an opportunity to delight more customers through that kind of communication. So we're looking more and more at trying to service customers at all points of their sales and purchasing journey through contact centers. So historically, it was all about Wismo. If I bought something, where the hell is it? Or I bought something, it's turned up, and my fridge has got a dent or whatever. Now what we're trying to do is to support customers through that. You know, if you're looking at something in our website, you can't see, pick up the phone and speak to us, or web chat with us, or WhatsApp with us, and we will help you through that purchasing journey. Now, we're not doing that because we're being remarkably altruistic and we're just a nice, friendly, warm business. We're doing that because we want to capture that customer and get them to buy whatever bloody product it is that they're looking at, and then make sure that it's the right product. Because the level of customers who will buy something big and shiny, stick it on their wall, and if it's a TV, and then actually use a fraction of its capability and become frustrated with it, and then try and send it back to us. So it's about making sure that actually the customer's making smart, informed purchasing decisions at all stages, rather than just picking up the phone to us and saying, right, I've spent 800 quid on the TV and it's not doing what I expected it to. So I think that COVID did me a favour, if I'm honest, in terms that it allowed us to become, well, hang on a minute, we're the only way you can engage with your customers, John Lewis. Therefore, you have to stop considering us as just being the people that get shouted at. And I think that that's probably not just true for the John Lewis and Waitrose contact centre estate. It's probably true for every business that historically ran a retail store estate. So I think that what I'm seeing across the industry more and more is a desire to help customers actively. I'm seeing a slightly concerning drive to help customers in deploying tech at them, and I think that we're allowing too many customer experience journeys to be designed by software engineers. It should be customers who are designing customer experience journeys, and we then build software solutions that support it, not trying to cram customers down the top of whichever particular pipe we've got that somebody's flogged us. And we've made the same mistake, I guess, as a whole bunch of other businesses that thought, right, live chat or WhatsApp, that's the solution to our telephony problems. And we drank the Kool-Aid and believe the stuff about it'll drive out your call volumes. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. It just makes customers have more capability to come at you faster and then more volume, and probably come at you about stuff that they historically wouldn't have picked the phone up about. So I think that what we need to make sure we're doing as an industry is demonstrating resilience and designing the right customer journey and being available to customers in the right way. That will allow us as an industry to shift away from being, it's all about phoning us when something goes wrong. Actually, it's okay to phone us just to ask us a question. Yeah, I've got a great example, and I'll try and do this in a really short way. We had a customer phone us about a washing machine that they wanted to buy. The customer was going to put this washing machine in an outside building, and it had to be built of stainless steel, or it was going to corrode. Customer had been into an electrical showroom, asked the question there, couldn't find out. Contacted the manufacturer couldn't find out. Contacted us because they thought we could find out. We did the legwork. We found out the original supplier. We found what the product was made of. It was made of stainless steel. We contacted that customer and said, it's made of stainless steel. Do you want to buy it from us? No, I don't. I want to buy it from somebody else because it's cheaper. It's fine. we sorted them out in the price, because at that point in time we still did never knowingly undersold, and we flogged them a washing machine. That, you know, any margin we made in that product was destroyed in the amount of effort that we had. But that's about a customer picking up the phone to us about something completely random and off the shelf, that no other body was able to answer. But that's the kind of value that we can add in a customer contact center estate that you can't add when you're standing on the shop floor. Yeah,
I completely agree. So if we move on to the next question, because I think that they all kind of start to interlink then, and there's this question about competency. And you know, as an outsourcer, I think we're really aware that we're getting a lot of questions and a lot of queries about people wanting to offshore, because there's a level of attrition that's there that's much more attractive than in the UK at the moment. There's a lot of people leaving you know, contact centers and lower paid work, changing their lifestyle, doing things differently, whereas in an offshore it tends to be more of a career-based approach to some of the contact center activity. And obviously you know, I was speaking to one organization who they take 6 months to get someone up to a full competency within the center, and then they leave. You've wasted 6 months, and the offset of that is that your customer suffers. Ultimately your quality suffers, your customer suffers. So Mark, question for you then. How do you maintain competency in centres, especially at these times where, you know, we're not quite sure how the usual set of people that come and work for us are going to react, and how long they're going to be with us, and you know, and how and I think, you know, Graham, I'll come to you in a minute, because I don't think your attrition is quite the same way as I recall from a conversation you and I had. But I guess for others, they must be seeing quite high attrition and maybe not having that constancy of workforce.
Yeah, so you know, I think it's a challenge that all retail businesses face, Andrew, and you know, at the moment we are fortunately not seeing that. Our staffing profiles are, you know, are fairly flat, which is great. You know, the utopia is that you don't face into attrition at all, right? But realistically, you know, it's a challenge that we all need to plan and prepare for. So I tried to break it down into 4, you know, distinct buckets, if you like, and those 4 are, you know, people, process, planning, and progression, right? So, you know, we start off with people. The fundamental is that you get the right people through the door first and foremost. The recruitment process that you have is robust. That the people that join your organisation are the people that you want to have with you, and you know, some of the things that really well, particularly in the BPO space, is that the team leaders get really embedded and involved in that recruitment process. Generally, you know, if the people are going to be sitting within your team, you're much more likely to be rigorous in that approach, right? So from a recruitment perspective, getting the right people in the door first and foremost, I think, is really important. And then, you know, if we look at the competency curve, you know, you mentioned 6 months there. Some businesses are 6 weeks, 6 months, you know, irrespective, it has an impact on the operation whilst we're getting up to speed. So, you know, the more that we can do for those individuals to get that competency curve shortened and support them during that curve, I think is super important. And, you know, it comes into the training, you know, recruitment straight into training. And as much as possible, we need to make sure it's simple, you know, that the team have the tools that they need and the processes that they're required to do the job efficiently, quickly, and that they're not pressured while they do it. You know, I think back to my time in contact centres on the phones, and luckily I worked with a lot of great businesses that actually their processes and training was solid. I came out on the phones and, you know, I probably knew about 70% of the processes that I needed, and that was enough, because the other 30%, you know, crop up so infrequently that you just need to accept that, and that's part and parcel of the job. But you know, for the 70%, 80%, 90%, whatever of the contact that you're handling so frequently, you know, those processes need to be solid, and that requires a lot of investment and asking yourself the tough questions as well. You know, Graham touched on it earlier on. Are we putting processes in place that are right for the customer and the colleague, or is it a sticking plaster over, you know, what is broken in the business, right? So, you know, really reviewing those robustly and making sure they're right for colleagues, you know, I think is super important. And then coming to that graduation journey, or, you know, their competency journey. super important that our colleagues know where they're at in that journey. I see it so often, it's overlooked. You know, you come out of training, you're almost right, there's your headset, away you go. You know, and it's not healthy for the business, it's certainly not healthy for the individual. You need to know at every stage where you're at. If you're trailing behind, why? You know, how can we support you to get to where you need to be? Or if you're ahead, you know, let's celebrate that. So certainly from a people perspective, getting them up to that competency curve, there's a lot that, you know, as leaders and, you know, from a business perspective that we can do to support, but that investment early doors, I think, is, you know, super important. You know, I spoke about the process there, and, you know, without rehashing that in too much depth, the more I think that we invest in process, not just from a people perspective, but also, you know, to counteract that, you know, attrition challenge. You know, if your processes are solid, it smooths your contact volumes, right? Because your FAQs are better, the ability to self-serve is much better, and then that attrition and competency challenge lessens. So, you know, from that perspective, you know, definitely an area that we want to be looking at. Planning, you know, I think retail's changed a lot in recent years. I remember, you know, the days of Black Friday and every contact centre BPO person panicking at the almost shuddering in terror at the mention of Black Friday, right? It hasn't really been that way in the last couple of years. Certainly, I haven't seen it in the clients that I've supported in the last 2-3 years. You know, but good planning ultimately counteracts these sort of challenges. And you know, I think it's much harder for smaller businesses. If you're a large organisation with a dedicated planning department, you know, effectively asking people to look at these trends and a lot of great depth, and that's what they're paid to do. Effectively, that's their job. For smaller contact centres, independent organisations, and smaller retailers, you know, maybe it's not an area that particularly they're focusing on a lot. Is actually, well, you know, when am I expecting my attrition to kick in, and those sort of trends, and being able to forecast when you need to put your groups in will ultimately help, because it takes the sting out of that competency curve, bring them in a little earlier. And then the final piece is obviously progression, right? So, you know, the ideal is that we don't have anyone leave our organisations, we retain that talent, and, you know, in so doing, the people that are great within the organisation can then, you know, be the next leaders and support those colleagues through their journey. There's been a lot of talk in recent weeks I've seen on LinkedIn about contact centres of career, and I think that's so powerful, right? Because, you know, if we can get people to think in that way, actually, you know, it's not just I'll join a business and I'll be on the phones for a couple of weeks and then I'll go on to something better. I mean, that was certainly my view when I joined. You know, that was a stepping stone until I find something, you know, decent or different. My view has completely changed in the last couple of years. I think a lot of people are following suit, but you know, people need to have opportunities to either work through or step into. And that can come in various forms, but if the opportunity isn't there, then, you know, you're losing your great talent to other organisations or other industries. So the more that we can do to show people, look, you know, there's a career here, whether it be, you know, your vertical career or into other areas in the organisation, the more that we can champion that, you know, I think it's almost,
yeah, I think that's huge. I think that's huge. Chris, in terms of the competency, when you've got people working from home, I don't know how you split the workforce now, but, you know, how do you find attrition works when people are at home versus the centre, and, you know, how do you optimize that mix and make sure that people at home, to Graham's point, you know, who are on an ironing board with a laptop, you know, how do we? It might be a bit extreme, but it does happen. How are we managing those guys?
It's interesting for us, actually. Probably about 18 months ago, we had a trial, the first time we'd done anything like it, where we recruited an entire team that was from start to end of their life cycle with us, was entirely remote. So recruitment was remote, training remote, grad bay remote, and then continuing, you know, to this day, they've never been to our head office. And it was a real challenge for us all, primarily driven around communication. But one of the big things that we've done during that period is break our training down to be quite modular. So whereas when I first started as an agent, it was a case of, here's a week's training, you're going to learn absolutely everything all in one go, and then away you go, you're going to be brilliant. With our in-house and our working from home guys, we will break it down. So you're going to learn this work stack, you're going to get that training, you're going to get the sufficient time specifically for that training, and then away you go. That's all you're going to do for a little while. Then once they've mastered that, we'll bring them back in for the next phase and the next phase and so on. I think depending on what route they go down with, it can be 6-7 different routes that they work down. And I think that helps in a few ways. A, you get that mastery that I talk about, but also one of the biggest challenges I think when it comes to attrition at agent level is that repetition and that boredom that can set in. People just get fed up and doing the same thing over and over. So, you know, if you spend 3 months working on a smaller module to become an expert at it, well, then you're going to get topped up with the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. It's keeping that job fresh rather than just being call fodder, just bam, 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 all the time. What it also helps them do is, because we keep it for that longer period, then Mark touches on it there about what's that progression path out. That's been one of the big wins for us. It's hard for the contact centre perspective because last year we had over 30 internal promotions. We're having attrition, but it's all, once we've got people and we've got them through grad bay, our attrition is almost exclusively in-house to other areas of the business. So it could be your classic contact centre route of going coach or team manager or whatever else. But most of our attrition is to analytics teams, product teams, marketing. We've lost them to legal and various other things. We're setting very often young people who aren't really sure what they want to do off on the way with a long-standing business on a proper career path. And that's been one of the challenges actually from my team managers. You become a people builder, so you become that conveyor belt where you're getting new people all the time and you're always losing your good ones. At least we keep them in house, and we kind of change that mindset of, rather than being a team manager who manages stats and output and performance, actually you're people building.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, this. I mean, I'd like to stand up another 3 or 4 minutes before we come to the final question. And yeah, Hugh, maybe you give your thoughts. I see you all nodding at different points through there. So, you know, what's your view on this?
I think for me, I always look at it as it needs to drive competency. You need to have a people focus underpinned by data driven. But it's really interesting that we're speaking about this because within our leadership team, we're speaking about career progression and retaining staff. And I asked the group the question, I'll probably ask this group the same question. Hands up, when you were a teenager, your desire was to be in the contact center industry in any shape or form. So, as I assumed, and no one's. I think that really highlights, I think the point, that was mentioned before. No one really comes into contact centers to begin with thinking that they're going to see a career from it, but I think there's a massive gap, I think, at all of our levels in terms of highlighting that and actually how we can be accountable for driving that. So something that I've embedded recently within ASDA is any new training group that comes in, the entire leadership team need to go in for ideally half an hour, but a minimum of 15 minutes to literally just tell their story. Because if you think about the majority of the operations that we have, most people are probably between 20 to 25 years old, starting off in a career. We probably need to give them just that bit more guidance than the average company or industry needs to, because they're not looking at us as or contact centers as a career. So I think hearing our stories, hearing our challenges, what we did, our development opportunities, if you get that in right at the beginning of training, that really gives people a bit of an eye opener, and I think it stops some of the releasing of people, whether it be to other businesses or within the wider business that we work for. Because I think one thing that really upsets me, maybe I'm a bit too emotional, but it's when you lose quality people to other areas when potentially you had opportunities for them to grow and develop. And then I think just a build on that is probably just how do we retain a competency with all those challenges. I think that helps at the beginning because it shows people that there's a career path for them. But it's also then from a data-driven perspective, and I think it's probably been commented on in some forms already, how do you make sure that your modular training programs really focus on the main contact drivers? Because we all know what our key contact drivers are. We all know what makes up the majority of the contacts, that we really focus and hone in on those for that 1 week, 2 week period, so that when the guys are on the phones, they might not be able to answer every single inquiry, but what they do know is they're absolute experts in 2/3 to 3/4 of the contact volume, so they can perform at a high level from the beginning, and that naturally then drives a reduction in your speed to competency curve. So I think for me, it's something that I do feel passionate about, and I think us as leaders have a lot more that we can do in terms of influencing at the really early stages to make sure that we retain that quality and competency within the business, apart from the obvious, have great knowledge-based systems, have the FAQs, so on and so forth.
It's really interesting. I want to stay on this, and Graham, I just want to ask you the same question, because I think the thing I've noticed about, and I'm one of them. We've been around this world for 30 years or whatever, a lot of us, and yeah, when we're in it, we're super passionate, right? And we all feel quite passionate about what we do. We care tremendously about the outcomes we achieve, and the idea of bringing people through, believing that there's a career here, is actually really exciting to us. And it feels to me that we've maybe not all done that all of our career to try and encourage people through, because we've been hit with KPIs and volume of calls that we need to do, and we've missed out on the person. And Graham, how conscious we have a lot of questions, so we need to kind of probably move fairly quickly on this, but I would love your input on this and how John Lewis are doing.
Yeah, so let's be honest, money talks. And what will attract people to our industry is a demonstration that they can make a good living out of it. Now, we all do. And there are a bunch of people who make good livings out of it. But if you're a school leaver, you're looking at careers that can earn you a bundle of cash. And in reality, you're probably looking at good careers that can earn you a bundle of cash quite easily. Very few people get involved in our industry because they enjoy being shouted at. I'm sure that there are some, but not very many. So what we need to get better at is demonstrating you can build a career and a good lifestyle off handling customer calls. So I started on phones. My first day in a call center was with.
Oh, Graham, I think we've lost you a little bit. We're going to have to move on. Graham, we've lost you. We can't hear you.
You printed out Excel spreadsheet, a pencil, and a telephone with a dial on it that you had to turn. And I think that's from customer contact. And I think that if we talk about, and if we continue to talk about our industry being, it's about helping people, it's about using technology. That's great, but it ain't really sexy, because we're not the best at helping people, and we're not the best at tech. Actually, we're about enabling people to enter into customer experience careers. We also need to look more broadly at who are we competing with in terms of the employment market, because we're not just competing with call centers. And the reality is people who are entering into our contact centers, the competition we're up against is Burger King, McDonald's, hospitality. It's all because we're all paying about the same stuff. So it's the package that we offer people at that entry level. How attractive is it? How attractive is the non-salaried elements of that? And demonstrating to people the career paths that are available with pounds, shillings, and pence attached. And not just saying, one day you might be a fat middle-aged guy with a beard on a webinar. That's not that attractive a proposition. You could choose between any four of us who you want to apply that to. So yeah, I think that it's that kind of stuff that I think, Andrew, we need to get better at, and driving that message home to people.
I agree. Thank you, Chris. That kind of brings on another topic of how good we are at embracing innovation and change in contact centers. I remember talking to someone from an organization once, and they talked about change equilibrium. We kind of bring one thing in and another thing goes out, but nothing really changes. We've had Graham talking about voice and other channels, and years ago our voice was going to leave us, and it's not left us. So how are you managing innovation and change in your business, and how do you bring it into the business to have an impact?
It's my favorite topic. I'm one of those who is just constantly hungry for change, and I think it starts very simply for me to don't just chase ideas, have a guiding principle of what you're looking to achieve over a longer period of time. And I do that as simply as I possibly can by asking myself just one question: does it have a material benefit for our agents or our customer? If it doesn't, stop. Why are we wasting our time? If the answer is not yes to that, stop. It's a waste. And then conversely, to a lot of people these days, I look for small changes all of the time rather than big ideas. I think people talk about innovation a lot and think around, oh, I'm going to come up with a silver bullet that's going to revolutionize an entire industry. And they go down that rabbit hole and they never come out, and they end up wasting weeks and months, sometimes careers chasing something that might not be out there. Whereas I tend to look and talk with my guys around, right, where can we save a click? What are our click savers? And we talk about that all the time, because the chances are if something's taking too many clicks, it's not good for our agents. It's a frustrating, flawed process or a flawed system. If it's taking too many clicks, it's expanding that time that the customer's on the phone to us, or how many emails are coming back into to them. So where do we save the clicks? And all of the time I could be chasing that big bang idea, I can land 10, 12, 15 small, meaningful, but genuinely beneficial small ideas. And I think the key thing is, you know, coming to Iceland was a great example. I come here and we had a good team of people who were well bedded in, quite long serving staff generally, but we were operating in quite old fashioned ways. So I come in as the new kid on the block going, right, we're going to change loads of stuff, and you could see that trepidation in people's face, like, oh, we've always done it this way. And very often people think of change as a real negative. You know, if they make this change, I'm going to be out of a job, and so on and so forth. And actually, for me, it's about showing the agents, the team managers, whoever's impacted by the change, that this is where, if I make this tweak, and it is only a tweak, your life is going to be that little bit better. Feeds back into the attrition stuff we were talking about. And they're always wary about it when you're trying to land that first one, or people say, actually, land that first one, take on the journey with you, and it starts to build a small bit of credibility. And then you do it again, and it builds that bit of understanding and whatever else. And our biggest achievement over the last 2.5 years, never of our conversations been around. It's always been about making this change, utilize it, which is then we have had attrition, less of an impact of that benefits from it. Our
Chris, we've got quite bad sound for you now. I don't know why. It's I think, is it the same for everyone, or is it just me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, same for me as well.
So I'm going to, in the interest of time, and just to try and get other people, and apologies, but the sound's kind of broken up quite badly. I just want to throw it out there really in terms of, and I guess one of the areas around innovation that everyone's talking about, and you know, Graham, you mentioned it earlier on, is the impact of ChatGPT, and you know, let's automate the world. Does anyone share an opinion on that from someone?
Yeah, well, I think it's anytime there's a new, you know, material shift in technology, everyone's either wholly excited or wholly scared about it, aren't they? And you know, I think if you're talking specifically about ChatGPT, I mean, I've had great fun with it, but I mean, you know, it probably opens up a broader question as to actually, and when we talk about technology, Chris touched on it, and Graham as well, is that, you know, these things are never the silver bullet, right? They're you know, they're generally the sticking plaster over what is a broken process within your business. And you know, it is frustrating when we talk about all these kind of sexy new ideas in terms of how we're going to revolutionise the industry with a bit of tech. You know, I think you know, in my experience anyway, in any business that I've worked with that has been, you know, successful in their customer experience strategy is actually, you know, strip it right back to basics. You know, Chris touched on it, I think, perfectly. What is going to make a material change to your customer, and what's going to make a material change to your advisors? And if you get those two things right, you know, you're hardly going to go wrong, are you?
It's that enabling of our advisors to have the best kind of conversation and engagement they can have, isn't it? That's the point. Hugh, how are you doing that in Asda?
I think for us at the moment, we're probably still on that journey in terms of, from my experience, the best way to look at it is to look at your contacts and your people and then differentiate them by simple and transactional. So anything that is transactional, you absolutely want to go through ChatGPT. I think probably I wouldn't say, well, I'd say reservations is such a hot topic at the moment. Everyone wants to get involved in it. They want to move at it at pace in an agile way, which I'm not against agile, but there's a lot of analysis you need to do in terms of your contact types. Where do contact volumes best sit, and with whom before you push into it? Because I'm a strong believer it has benefits in terms of deflecting volume from the frontline colleagues. But for me, at least at this stage in contact center industry, it's not going to replace the colleagues on the phone. So it's having that balance between what can you remove effectively, but what still needs to remain with the best people that we have on the phones, delighting the customers when we give them the opportunity to. So yeah, want to embrace it, but with some reservation as well, to make sure that we don't completely do a 360 in terms of how we manage our customers.
Yeah, and Graham, finally to you, when you've got such a large volume of people working for you on the phones, on the channels that are working, and out in the stores, you know, there's so many areas that you can innovate on, and there's so many things that you can do. I'd love to know kind of kind of how you approach that, and B, how you, and this is a bit of a selfish one, but how you embrace partner innovation as well, and how you look at that to come into the organization.
So yeah, how do we embrace it? We embrace it by being considered in our approach to it. You know, the partnership, we're not in business to be a cutting edge tech deployment business. We're in business to deliver great experiences to customers, and to be considered in every pound that we spend. You know, we're a workers cooperative, 82,000 people. I can be held to account by any one of those 82,000 on the decisions that I make, and that's true of any decision maker in our business. So that allows us to be enabled and empowered to make suggestions, to think about innovative ways to deal with customer problems, whether it be through tech or process or policy change and improvement. We don't have a suggestions box in our business. We've got 82,000 people who are able to make questions, to raise questions, and 82,000 people who are able to challenge decisions and questions. That means that we're way more enabled in those conversations than probably any other organization I've ever been part of. And you know, what we don't do, Andrew, is we don't chase the shiny sexy. You know, I spent half my life getting butchered and badgered and bullied by software salesmen. My standard response is go away and come back with a use case. Once you've deployed it into a big retailer and demonstrated that it can deliver the savings that you say it can, then come back and speak to me. Until then, jog on. And you know, and if you're an existing BPO provider to us, do the job that we ask you to until you've got the credibility to come and talk to us about stuff. There is nothing more frustrating as a vendor manager than you sign a contract in day one, and day two you've got some sweaty salesman trying to flog you something else. You know, it's go away and get the credibility and then come back. And that's our approach to it. You know, we use the power of the partnership, and we use the fact that we're co-owners to allow us to be engaged in customer experience, because the reality is, without great customer experience, the partnership won't continue to exist.
Right. I mean, I think that's a perfect sentence probably to end this on. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and you know, I think we're all of the same opinion that you know, that there's such a lot to do. I think the competency question, I suspect we could probably talk all day on just that one alone, because that's at the heart of our people and how our people experience the work that they do with us and their journey with your customers as well. So listen, I want to thank you all, and really appreciate all of your time and commitment to doing this with us today. And for those of listening, I really hope you've managed to get something out of this and it's been useful. And you know, maybe we should put a day in the diary and actually debate this fully for a considerable period of time, because it feels like there's such big topics here that we just touch on with these kind of conversations. And but thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. We do have a couple of questions from the audience, but as we have run out of time, what we'll do is we'll get back to you individually. So your questions will be answered. I'll just gather the replies from the panel and contact you directly. Apologies for the sound. Obviously, we know up and down the country we've got adverse weather at the moment, so that does have an impact on these live sessions, I'm afraid. So that just leaves me to say thank you so much to our panel and our chair, Andrew. I really appreciate it. The session was sponsored by Quantanite, and I've provided details in the chat box. Make sure you have a look at their website. For more information on UKCCF and membership, please visit our website www.uk-ccf.co.uk. And for all the latest news, articles, and for more content from our industry, have a look at our e-magazine, contactcentermonthly.co.uk. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Again, thank you, panel. Thank you, Andrew. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks all.